Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour, where we highlight origin stories of game developers.
Today we're doing a community episode about hiring and how AAA studios can sometimes suck at hiring and what indies can do to compete against them.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of real developers breaking into the industry, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode.
This is an unedited recording of a weekly event we host in the Indie Game Academy Discord on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so feel free to swing by for the next one and ask your questions live. There are links to join down below.
We're your hosts, Willem Delventhal, headmaster of the Indie Game Academy and the Wizard of Games.
And I'm Tim Wood, founder of Rightfinder Headhunting and the Knight of Games Recruitment.
Amazing. And as Tim said, we're doing a community episode today. So y'all, if you've been a listener on the show before, you know that community episodes are a little bit different. Rather than having one or two guests, we instead actually interview the audience, all of you lovely, wonderful people. Mostly that means we are grabbing people from the Discord to have brief chats with us on stage. So audience, those who are in the Discord or even on the stream, we can sort of interview via the stream. Let us know if you want to come up and talk about any particular subject. We like to bring up 2 or 3 people just for a couple of minutes every single time. So, Tim, the first question, usually how we finish this intro, is to ask what the guest is having for lunch today. So I guess that falls on you. What are you having for lunch, Tim?
So earlier today, I made my own smashed beef burgers with like some diced onion, some homemade burger sauce, and I washed it down with a double coffee because I'm an animal. And it's carried me through to about 5 p.m. local time now. So don't know what I'll do for food later. Perhaps a pizza. We'll see.
Wow. Okay. I am a little bit jealous. I just slammed down some horrendous Dunkin' Donuts sandwich because I was hungry and I don't have any food in the house and I need to shop. So you've got me beat, sir.
I like that. I like that Dunkin' Donuts do sandwiches. Are they a sandwich within a donut? Like, how excited should I be getting?
This is the most American question. Tim is from London, for those who may not know. It's the most American question you could hit me with. No, it's just a breakfast sandwich. It was a bagel.
All right. I was thinking you had a sandwich, but just made out of donuts. I might have to make that later, and I'll report back how that goes.
Yep. We can launch a new business together. All right, so Tim, we're actually doing an experiment this episode. Tim and I have been lightly talking about bringing him on as a permanent co-host for the Indie Game Lunch Hour. And before we commit to that, we decided to keep it easy and just do 3 episodes together. So the next 3 episodes, Tim will be co-hosting this show with me. I am pumped to have you on. We've run a number of events together, and we always have good energy together and good vibes together. In order to do our typical thing and then also have the beginning of this show be similar to other episodes, I'd love to get that origin story that we typically start with, but from you, Tim. So can you tell us where you are in the game industry and how you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the games industry for around 5 years now, mainly in a recruitment capacity. So I'm a vendor for different studios, whether they're indies, AAAs, or somewhere in between. We help them hire the right people for the right jobs. I got into that by being a recruiter for many years previously. I've run internal teams myself. I've been part of larger agencies working to fill roles for large companies, and I also spent some time as a recruitment copywriter. So that's the person that does all of the written advertising, social media posts, and generally tries to engage and attract candidates to companies. So I've kind of done a bit of everything. My main role before I decided to strike out alone was to kind of parachute in to places internally and fix their broken recruitment processes. I got into games by kind of forcing my way in, I guess. Very much, I joined a startup recruitment agency that was looking for people with recruitment experience, copywriting experience, who could adapt to a new market quite quickly, which was something that I've got quite a bit of experience in. And then from there, I transitioned into launching my own business about 4.5 years ago now. And it's been a lot of fun. Along the way, I picked up a contract writing for a VR action game, essentially bios, barks, and everything in between. Um, and playing a lot of games and saying it's for work research. That's kind of my whole vibe.
Amazing. All right, this is something I've wondered for a while, and I don't think I've ever directly asked you this. So, right finder headhunting, the way that Tim spells this is WRITE headhunting. So, like writing, like the ancient art of putting words on papyrus, I don't know, whatever, stone. So what, Tim, why is it right finder? Like writing.
So a lot of recruitment agencies are called, they're named after their founders. And I felt cringe calling it Timwood Recruitment because there was going to be more than just Timwood in it. So I thought, well, what do? I write and I find people, so I'll just call it Right Finder, and that is as much thought as went into it. I did think the idea of calling it something like Super Duper Games or something like that could be fun, but I just thought we'll go with Right Finder. I'm a copywriter as well, so my adverts and my content is all me. It's not AI or someone else. So just kind of having it as a descriptor for me without being too obvious.
Got it. Amazing. Yeah, that is one of the questions that I get now and then from indie devs is what should I call my studio or what should I call my game? And there's a lot of potential research you could do. There are better and worse names for sure, but at the end of the day, naming kind of doesn't matter. And I love your example of like,
Yeah,
whatever you're gonna call it. Yeah.
I like the fun studio names as well when it's just like it's got a bit of a story to it. There was a gift shop near where I grew up called Frog Orange, and I went in there all the time to get various like birthday presents, knickknacks, that kind of thing. And I was like, "Why are you called Frog Orange?" And the guy was just like, "Well, I just made a list of a load of words, rolled some dice, and I just picked the two that it landed on." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." It can be as simple as that, but as long as it's, I guess that you like it, that's the main thing, right?
Yeah, amazing. All right, now I have heard through the grapevine, and not at all because we've directly chatted about it and you've sent me copies of it, that you are writing a book, sir.
I am indeed. I'm
Hmm.
I'm writing a fledgling dark fantasy, which I have almost finished pulling out of my brain. So that's been a nice way to kind of de-stress from what's going on in the industry for the last 2 years. I started writing it in earnest probably January, February of this year. I'm at about 95,000 words now, with only 6 chapters to go. So I'm like full steam ahead, but that's really only been possible because I joined a writing Discord of all game writers who are just kind of there to help keep you accountable for your targets, being really supportive, chatting away, beta reading, and normally where I tail off at 20, 30,000 words for a book, I've nearly finished the damn thing now. And that's all been down to just like a really wonderful community and finding those like-minded individuals that they don't have a stake in anything that I do, but because it's a craft we're all passionate about, and one that we really love, it's kind of we've all supported and helped each other work on our own solo projects. So definitely some parallels to kind of indie game development, and I really do feel a lot more affinity for indie game developers now because I've had to go through some painful creative processes myself, and I'm just putting words on a page. I'm not dealing with like 3D space or anything. So it's just like a whole experience, but very fun. The beta readers seem to like it, so we'll see if I can finish it and if it's as good as it was in here when I was thinking it up.
We'll see. Amazing. Yeah, I really narrative interestingly, so I'm a game designer in industry. Narrative interestingly is one of the places that I feel the weakest. I can definitely create experiences, I can definitely tell a story. But ultimately where I excel is like the mechanical aspect of how a game plays. And so I always have really respected a good narrative designer and writer, somebody who can put words down on a page or on a screen and elicit an emotional reaction via those words. My favorite games, I actually recently last night was trying to decide what my top 5 games of all time are which there's a post coming about that soon, everybody. I won't reveal it here. And I was struggling a bit, but ultimately when I decided on those top 5, I realized I think 4 out of the 5 are narrative heavy, super deep, rich in storytelling, rich in world building, and that I think ultimately that's what attracts me the most to a game is when the world feels like a unique place that I get to visit and lose myself in, and when there's almost this bittersweet melancholy when I finish the game because I have to leave this world now.
Oh, I totally feel that. I mean, when I played the first Mass Effect game and some of the choices you make in that, and I came down to choosing between, I don't think it's a spoiler now, the game's as old as I am nearly,
Pretty old.
but you're choosing between like Ashley and Caden and all of that kind of thing. And then you keep that save file and you play Mass Effect 2 and then Mass Effect 3 and you get to the final finale of the game and it's like you've been on this huge journey and everyone else you talk to is like, yeah, I love Mass Effect, it's a great game, but everyone's had pretty much their own unique experience, much like your own playthrough of Baldur's Gate. And it's something really special and another game that kind of really got me going from that emotional level was the original Knights of the Old Republic RPG written by Drew Karpyshyn. Like that was a monster of a game to be playing through on like Christmas Day when I was like, oh, I've mainly played Time Crisis before that. It was my first ever RPG or turn-based RPG, and I was like, oh, I can't just hold down trigger and swing the lightsaber, and it just like opened up this whole new world to me, like not just on the narrative enjoyment level, but video games and the types of games I actually really enjoyed playing.
Absolutely. I saw Amani in the comments says, I mean, only one of those two is a space racist, referring to Ashley versus Caden decision. I when I played, Ashley was my love interest. I'm sorry, guys. You are all very much allowed to judge me. Please judge me. Let me help me repent. And then Caden was on my squad, so it was a painful decision. Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, and BG3 may or may not all be mentioned in my top video games of all time list, my personal list. All right, now. We, of course, promised today's topic would be why AAA hiring can suck and how to do it differently as an indie, how indies can compete. So, Tim, I think you, between the two of us, are the most qualified to give us an introduction to this topic. Why don't you take us away?
Yeah, I mean, with hiring right now, like let's not sugarcoat it. It is in a dire state. We've seen reams and reams of layoffs. There are very few jobs available. And certainly anyone who fits the candidate mold in the job seeking process is going to notice that a lot of processes are I'm trying to be polite here, not fit for purpose. I think where AAA hiring can do very well is they often have a much larger budget. They have a much larger reach than indies, and that lends itself well to volume hiring and and having that, I guess, that competitive pull that makes people want to work for them. I think where that sucks is that they have a lot of the buying power. We're seeing a huge return to kind of the mandated office working and lack of remote models, which is cutting off hugely diverse pools of talent or people with specific needs who are more than able to do the job, but because of the inflexibility in working practices, they're unable to actually work there. We're also seeing that a lot of AAAs, I feel like their HR and recruitment teams are atrophying. If you look at the people being laid off in the first waves, a lot of them are kind of recruitment teams, HR teams, marketing teams, and stuff like that. I know of several cases where there are recruiters with perhaps 30 to 50 open requisitions for a large multinational AAA, and they might be the only human being in a certain geographic sector. So they're immediately trying to meet this huge workload and quality process for people, and it's getting slow. Interviews are taking weeks to book in. People are rejected for arbitrary reasons, or there's more of a reliance on applicant tracking system rating systems that are not very good. That will use things like star ratings or keyword matching to try and pull out who's appropriate and who isn't, and you're losing what is the most important part of the recruitment process, which is the human element. How do you get someone excited and infused about an organization? And I'm not saying you're getting infused and excited because you're getting hired. Some of the best contacts you can make are from giving someone, a genuine and empathetic rejection and the reasons as to why, so they can move forward in their job search process, versus hey, percentage sign, first name, percentage sign, you've been unsuccessful, or in most cases, no answer at all. So I think AAAs do benefit from their size, but they can be a victim of their own kind of success, I guess, in some ways, because the more gears you have in a machine, the more likely it is to break down. I think where indie studios really have an opportunity is that there is a lot of talent on the market right now. A lot of talent is being walled off because they require or need a more flexible model of working. And many indie studios can configure themselves or are already operating in that way, so they can access more of a diverse geographic pool of talent. Where they struggle is things like funding. It's things like business runway. It might be that they have a very specific tech requirement or set of skills that they need, and they just can't penetrate the market enough to find those individuals. So the indies I've seen do very well are the ones who are like, right, well, we could try and find someone over the next year or two, or could we train someone up? And I've noticed that they tend to be more flexible with the kind of how can we get creative at solving this hiring issue problem than perhaps some AAAs who may have policies and procedures coming out of their ears that mean they can't be as flexible in the recruitment process as maybe the individuals running it would like it to be. The amount of recruiters I've talked to and I've pitched ideas to, saying, hey, we could do things better this way, are like, I'd love to, but my hands are tied. We need to talk to the powers that be. And it's the powers that be in those committees that can sometimes really slow things down.
That's interesting. So it sounds to me like you're saying the greatest strength that an indie has over a AAA in the hiring sphere and the team building sphere is the flexibility, is the ability for an indie team to more thoughtfully process candidates and
Yeah.
therefore have a greater flexibility in the types of people they might hire and work with, which I would guess also probably winds up bringing a greater diversity of thought into the actual room and into the development team, rather than continuing with the same type of person that the standard operating procedures have defined. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. And I think the other side of the coin to that is that an indie studio, by definition, usually is a lot smaller. They probably don't have a dedicated recruitment team or HR team. So when they are putting adverts out there, they're probably getting a ton of responses because people are going, hey, this looks like a cool studio. It's remote or hybrid. There's all this cool stuff that I could be doing. That sounds like a much better deal than ex AAA studio who wants me to work down a salt mine in England. It's where would I want to go? And so you can end up getting quite inundated with applications, and then that's where the quality of the actual candidate experience really takes a hit. Because if you're one person, imagine you're hiring for 20 different roles. They're not all just a easy role, like I need a recruiter who has recruited for at least one big company in their career, but instead they're really niche skill sets. They're really kind of nitty gritty tools that you've got to get your head around so you can correctly assess them, and then you're getting kind of 100 to 200 people per role. That really does snowball your time. If you think about having maybe a 40-hour work week, about 5 to 8 of those hours could probably be spent in meetings quite easily. You're then down to around 30 hours to assess over 2,000 applicants. It really adds up very quickly, and you'll often find that recruiters and HR individuals will crunch themselves to get through that assessment, which in some ways it's great those people are getting looked at, but also what is the quality of that assessment going to look like? If I'm looking at a CV at 3 in the morning and I'm stressed out to high heaven because my clients or my hiring managers are wanting to know the status of a role, am I going to make the wrong decision here or there? You know, that's kind of what you've always got to what I add up to. So it's kind of a damned if you're AAA, damned if you're indie, but also not in both ways. It really does depend on those individual situations, but there are many things that you can do to try and make that process a little more friendly and a little cleaner. So you're not kind of messing about candidates who are probably getting messed about by the other 50 applications they've done because they're trying to keep a roof over their heads right now.
Yeah, this is interesting. All right, I want to bring it to the low budget conversation. So I don't know. So I don't know if people know this, but indies tend to have smaller budgets than AAA's. Their games tend to have less money behind them, and that means that indies almost certainly can't hire recruiters until they're more like a AA anyway, and they also can't pay as well, if at all. So something that I have seen more and more common lately with movements like Cave Bear Studios, the Indie Game Academy's Foundry program is doing this as well, and then tons and tons of just individual indies is profit share and revenue share agreements. Tons of teams are getting put together and they're all saying, we're going to work for free. We're going to collectively put in some sweat equity and we're going to each take X% of how much money this game makes as a result. I've seen a lot of juniors and students do this as well for the sake of portfolio pieces, even if it doesn't really make any money. Like Ruby Shark did this with their game that I'm forgetting the name of. Even if the game doesn't necessarily make money, it's nice to have that agreement. So you're like, well, if it does make money, like at least we're getting something. But the problem with revenue share is that it's revenue share. You're committing a certain amount of however much this game makes, and therefore you're really tying your hands together. I'm curious, what does hiring look like in your opinion on a team that has zero or next to zero budget?
I mean, the short answer is quite difficult. You'll definitely get people that are up for working in those sweat equity kind of agreements, or in a hey, you know, we'll all make this pie together and take home an equal slice. Like those people are out there. I've been one of those people in days gone by, because I've got the privilege to be able to make those financial decisions at times. But you are going to vastly limit your pool. If you think about the last two and a bit years in games where we've been going through these layoffs, the vast majority of people have been unemployed for that entire time, and they're surviving off benefits, GoFundMe's, their families, friends, or other support structures. And so they're going to be right on the breadline or under it in most cases. So if you're wanting to hire individuals like that, but you've got no budget to pay them, you're not going to sign them. It's just not going to happen. So I think you just need to be incredibly upfront with what you're asking of people. If you are one of those studios that is, you know, looking for someone to kind of work for free in return for equity or something like that, that needs to be in your initial communication, because it's like the standard rule of marketing, right? You're always preaching to people that will definitely buy from you or who might buy from you, and the people that will never buy from you, you want to give them the opportunity to leave immediately, and then you can focus on the core audience that you actually are trying to talk to. So in this case, like whether those models are good or bad, I can't really say. I can say that sometimes they've worked, sometimes they haven't, but you just have to be honest with people throughout a recruitment process. You know, have a job description that is actually accurate as to what they'll be doing, and then they can make a decision on, do I want to commit to this for 6 months and see where it goes? Do I believe in this idea and this vision enough, or the Kickstarter or whatever, to essentially gamble with my time and expertise? But again, you're only going to get candidates that are in that position to actually do so. It really is swings and roundabouts in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm actually a big fan of the process of profit or revenue share, and it absolutely is tricky, and it absolutely is less desirable than having a nice straight agreement with somebody where you're just paying them. I think if you're capable of paying, you're capable of finding a budget, you should do that. It's better for everybody, yourself included. Imagine, for example, if you have a budget, you've set aside money, you have that money available, and you pay somebody, $50 an hour to do a specific task, and then your game absolutely blows up. Any of that extra money is now yours to use as you may. You can give bonuses, etc., but that money's yours. If the opposite happens and you're like, well, in order to attract this person who's worth $50 an hour, I got to give them 20% of the game, and then your game absolutely blows up. A fifth of your game is now theirs, and you've tied your hands in a way that absolutely restricts you because 20% is a gigantic chunk of a whole company. Typically, like if you're talking like a traditional foundership, like you're just starting a company, let alone a game studio. Typically, the founders, all of them, share less than 50%. Usually, it's more like 30%, especially a company that is funded. So 20% to an individual who isn't even a founder is like a lot. So you're tying your hands in a way that really restricts where the game goes. That said, revenue share and profit share, I really like for the sake of learning, for the sake of juniors, and for the sake of indies. I think it is a really powerful option for people who are trying to get portfolio pieces. Definitely. That's an easy use case that I think it totally works. And then even for those smaller indies who can't find funding or are having trouble finding funding, I think it is still a good, viable option, especially in this time period where there's so much talent out there from genuinely really talented teams, powerful games, big titles in the past, who are willing to just like, man, I got to stay busy during this crazy period of unemployment. And I think your game idea is really cool. And I will work on it for, 5, 10, 20%. I think basically my big caveat is be careful and know that it limits the future of your game every time you pay off every time you promise a certain amount of rev share. And by the way, anytime you promise rev share, profit share, or equity, make sure it vests, which means you get it over time for contributing to the project. You don't get it all at once. You aren't promised all of it. Usually you get a period, a certain amount after you've worked a period, and then you kind of accrue it after that. All right. So we have on stage our first guest of the day, which is Krethik. Krethik has a comment that I'd love us to explore together a little bit. Krethik, do you want to introduce the struggle that you're currently having? Hi, Krethik. Oh, we can't hear you. We may need to turn on a microphone. No, we can't.
Can you hear me now?
Hello? Oh, there we go. Yes, perfect. Hello, Krethik.
Okay. Hi, Tim. Hi, Willem.
Hi.
Okay. I have this question. It's not a question. I had this two experiences actually. In the month of July, first week, a game designer just called me randomly and he said my profile is good, and he recommended my profile to the HR. But after a few days, HR didn't like my profile, and I believe the HR is not from the game dev background, and I think he or she rejected my profile. Another instance just happened last week is that I was given an assignment on Friday night, and I was about to start on Sunday morning, and the deadline was on Monday night. Monday night was the deadline, and I was rejected on Sunday morning. I don't know how can I don't know how to understand this. Is the recruitment process has gone really bad? Just wanted to know.
Yeah, so I mean, a recruitment process will vary at every company because you'll get some recruitment processes that are relatively light and run by people that may be quite new to recruitment, and you may get others that are quite rigorous and are run by an experienced team, and everything kind of works as you'd expect it to. And it really does depend company to company what you're going to get. So it's a bit of a lottery in that sense. To look at your first situation that you found yourself in, so the senior game designer got in touch with you proactively and essentially said, "Hey, you look like you'd be a fit for an open role in my team or at my company." Am I correct in that kind of assumption?
I have not applied for the role. I just got a call from him. He just saw my profile. He has
Okay.
15 years of experience in the games industry
Yeah.
in Singapore and Malaysia. So he just called me
Cool.
randomly.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's great that you were discoverable enough for them to actually find you and see that potential. And I think you should absolutely hold on to that and keep doing what you're doing online, because that digital footprint is clearly working for you. What has probably happened here, and take everything I say with a pinch of salt because I don't know this company or how they work, but it sounds like they were doing some kind of employee referral scheme, or perhaps this individual is in the team that's hiring and they've said, hey, I like the look of this individual's profile. What do you think? What typically happens in a recruitment process is the HR and recruitment team collate anyone who applies, anyone that they find, anyone that another employee finds, and they'll put them through a benchmark screening process. In most cases, if someone has been identified by a subject matter expert, such as a senior game designer, as this is a good profile to look at, the recruiter will move your profile over to the hiring manager for that team. That's the person who pushes the big green button on hiring and goes, hey, here's your short list of candidates. So the recruiters tend to only reject people if they completely don't meet the criteria, or if there have been what's called knockout questions put in the application process. So it might say, do you ever have experience with Houdini? And if someone puts no and the role really does require Houdini, they'd get auto rejected. So it could be that the hiring manager for the role has decided for whatever reason that they don't want to move forward. It might be that the recruiter has looked at your CV versus a job description and rejected you for that reason. And it might be that the senior game designer has seen enough of your profile to know that you'd be a good fit for the team, but because you don't have one or two metrics that are present in a standardized job description, the HR and recruitment team have perhaps rejected you. So if I were in your position, I'd very nicely write to this individual that's got in touch with you and go, hey, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I have been rejected by the HR and recruitment team. Just wanted to run that by you in case you're the hiring manager, or if you did want to have a chat with me, more than willing to have a conversation. But equally, if it's gone down another path, completely understand, because we want to always keep those bridges open. And the fact that they've reached out to you, put their name on the line to put your name forward to the recruitment team, that's an individual that I would be networking and trying to befriend with regardless of outcome, because they're going to know people, they're going to move on to other companies, but also they may well look at that message and go, oh, that's a bit weird that Tim in recruitment's rejected Crefit. Let me just send them a Slack message and go, hey, actually, we do want to talk with Crefit. Perhaps we need to revisit the job description because it's not as accurate as it used to be, because you'll find that job descriptions are reused over the years. These days, people just go on ChatGPT and go, make me a game designer job description, and it might not be accurate. So you could be falling victim to any number of these idiosyncrasies that are kind of taking opportunities away. So that's what I do in your first instance. Your second instance, correct me if I'm wrong, I might have just misremembered it, even though you only just said it, but you had an assignment issued to you on Friday, you started it on Sunday, and then on submission they rejected you before the deadline?
Exactly. The Monday was
Yeah.
the deadline, and they rejected me on Sunday afternoon. Rejected
Okay.
me completely.
Yeah, so it could be that we have a very proactive hiring manager at play here who is logging in on the weekends and looking at tests as they come in and making a decision, during that process. Or it could be something else, and I really couldn't put my finger as to what that is. What I would be doing is emailing the recruitment team and asking for feedback. And I would point out, hey, I know the deadline for the test was Monday and I received a rejection on Sunday. That's quite a quick rejection. Could I please have some feedback as to why, so I can improve for my next process or whatever? It might be, these are slim, rare occasions, but sometimes recruiters do hit the wrong button and things like that. Like human error does happen. earlier in my career, I once sent a rejection to about 5 people that we actually wanted to bring in to interview. So I looked very silly when I was ringing them apologising. It could be something like that. What it sounds like to me is that, and this is just me guesstimating based on my other experiences, but if someone is reviewing tests for hiring on a weekend, they're probably very busy in the week with their day-to-day duties, so they're squeezing recruitment in on the weekend. So that might be why you've been rejected before that deadline has officially passed.
Just the final question, when you
Sure.
when I mentioned about the first instance, let me
Mm.
say that when a HR likes your profile, of course I'll have to pass a round of interviews. Let me say technical interview and I'll have to pass the technical requirement. If the let me say the senior designer already likes my profile, that's already green signal, right? Like what would be a rejection purpose, right?
I mean, I can't comment on why this specific company have made those decisions, but in any recruitment process, even if, if I'm recruiting for an art role and a senior artist is like, hey, this person looks pretty good, we should maybe talk to them, they still have to go through the same screening and recruitment process as everyone else. That's to ensure a fair and unbiased recruitment process. And I'm going to asterisk that with in an ideal world, because I know unideal processes exist, but also the person who makes the decision on whether we actually move forward with hiring and onboarding someone to the company might be completely different person in seniority or skill set to the individual that has acquired you. In my own team, when I've had headhunters working at RightFinder, for example, I would often use them as what we call resources. So my headhunters would be going out, identifying profiles that could be a good match, sending them to me for me to look over with my additional experience and hopefully some wisdom. And then I would make a decision on, do I want to, talk to this individual or not? So it could just be a case of hierarchy and someone with more experience or who is closer to the ground on what those requirements are has decided that they shouldn't move forward for whatever reason. Or it could be something like the situation I mentioned earlier with an old JD, the HR team and the design team not being as joined up as perhaps they could be in an ideal world, and things have fallen through the cracks there. But I think probably the best way to move forward with that is to seek feedback, is to maybe just mention it very politely and nicely to the individual that spoke to you and see if anything can be done there, but also, cultivate them as a contact as well, especially if they've, taken the time to get in touch with you and move things forward. My gut feeling is that there is a misalignment with what HR and recruitment have been told on paper they need to find versus what the team actually want. If this was an email I was getting as a head of recruitment that I needed to look into, like a complaint or something, I would be suggesting that the design team and the recruitment team sit down together and have a conversation on what it is they actually need. And, do we need to revisit adverts, job descriptions, or the process itself to make it more accurate and prevent frustration like you're sadly experiencing because you've had your hopes risen up by this senior game designer going, hey, like, we want to talk. You're like, oh, great. I don't have to deal with the usual Bravo Sierra that I do in recruitment process. And then you've just got the auto rejection anyway. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, well, why did you contact me? Like, I completely get why you're confused. I certainly would be.
I think if I can jump in on this, I want to move on to a new topic here in just a second. But one of the things that we mentioned here in the earlier part of this episode is that AAAs have a ton of just sort of like bureaucratic debt. There's so many different people contributing to a single decision that it's actually very difficult to have a common through line. Whereas in indie, you're typically going to there's going to be one person who's probably championing the hiring process. And then they'll definitely get opinions from other people on the team. But you're generally working with a much smaller pool of people. Part of the reason that when you apply to anything close to a AAA, you go through like 7 interviews is because there's so many different people who are giving their thoughts on whether or not somebody should be hired. So it's very possible that this senior was like, this guy rocks. and then some other person was like, nope, he doesn't have the, I don't know, visual scripting that we said we needed for this role, like something like that. And that other person shut it down without ever being connected to you. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. And unfortunately, uh, good and bad, right? AAA and indie, while I am all the way for indie, AAA, the process of having so many people involved in a decision is not necessarily a bad thing. There's strengths and weaknesses to that. But one of the weaknesses is that no individual is making the decision. It's a bunch of people who are all contributing. The other thing that may be true here, and hopefully this is not true because this kind of sucks, is that senior may have just been being nice. Maybe they were like, I want to help this guy out. Let me give him a chance. I'm going to tell him that he's awesome because it feels nice to tell somebody that they're awesome. And then unfortunately you weren't actually up to snuff. That does happen too. Humans like to make each other feel good and they don't like to be the bearer of bad news. Maybe he thought you had something you didn't. I once actually got a interview with a game designer for a combat design role. And when he interviewed me, it was like such a positive interview. I was really excited. I was like, wow, like I think I'll work here, no problem. Like that was such a fantastic interview. And then I talked to his senior in the next interview, and he was the fact that I had not worked on a VR title before was just a straight deal breaker, and he didn't care, and frankly was even a little bit rude. So there's just like different things that different members of that decision are checking for as well. All right,
you'll never see the disagreements behind the curtains with companies either. Like,
Yep.
part of my role is I'm a third party headhunter, so I go out and find candidates and I represent them to companies. And sometimes I'll get rejections. I'll be like, well, actually, I think you're wrong because of these reasons, and I have overturned mild rejections in the past. But your senior designer friend may well have really fought for you in those chats, but it wouldn't be corporately appropriate for him to actually tell you that, or him or her. I was assuming there, but no, I would definitely ask for those feedbacks because you deserve those feedbacks, and a good process should give them to you, and then from there you can hopefully make a good guess or an inference as to why this happened, and then you can plot your next best steps forward from there.
Amazing.
Thank you.
All right,
thank you, Willem.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
Yes. Thank you, Graphic. And you can hang out on stage. Maybe you'll join the next conversation here. So, Wendy, we've pulled you up. You were asking about finding mentors in the space, and I told you that we could wrap it into the conversation as basically like hiring or sourcing advisors, mentors. Do you have any specific questions or thoughts in that space?
Yeah. Hello. Good to see you
Hello.
both. I was doing something super important in picking up my coffee, so I couldn't come on stage.
Very important.
Both of the guys going, hey, we can have an iced macchiato. Anyway, so I have the great fortune of working with a mentor right now, but I only have 2 more chats with them over the next, say, like 6 weeks. So I'm thinking forward because I know I'm going to be extra motivated, having this time. So I'm looking at like, where do I find my next one? So kind of the reverse, like I'm sourcing, out, advisor / mentor and looking for any tips either of you may have.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what I think, Tim. I'm curious if you agree with this. This is one of the places that indies have a much greater strength than AAAs. AAAs have money, and therefore, if you're going to work for a AAA, ask for money. Indies, on the other hand, have a story. I was recently, so we started the Foundry program, which is our sort of experimental publishing arm that we're going to be trying to grow over the next couple of years. And during the process of founding that program, we've talked to a lot of different publishers, especially in the indie space. One of our favorite partners recently, or I should say friends, they aren't necessarily officially partnered with us, is Akupara Games. Really cool indie first publisher. They've made a lot of really cool games like Rain or Cryptmancer. And we asked them their opinion on whether or not we should be the ones who put up the Kickstarters for the Foundry game. So should it be the Indie Game Academy's Kickstarter account, or should it be the indie game developers' accounts? And he instantly was like, it should absolutely be the indie game devs. Nobody cares about the Indie Game Academy. They care about these indie devs. They care about the indie story. So that story is a huge part of the strength of the indie. Your struggle, everybody, that you're all so frustrated with, myself included, I get it, is actually a huge part of what makes people want to work with you and contribute to you. So, in my opinion, finding mentors and advisors, people to help you out both personally and then as a studio, is actually one of the major strengths of an indie space. Once you have money, you're less likely to attract somebody like that unless you're directly paying them and it's just a role. And instead, these volunteers advisors are often very excited to be held up as an advisor, to be put in that position of like trust and respect, and to be able to give their opinions to, a young, hot, inspired somebody. When I say hot, I mean like up and coming person who they believe will listen to them and apply their lessons. That's one of the greatest values that you give to a mentor or an advisor. I'm curious, Tim, in your opinion, how does one source that person? How do you find mentors, advisors for your studio or just for yourself?
Yeah, so I'll answer this question with my own journey with a mentor. When I first started out in recruitment, I really didn't have a clue what I was doing. All I knew was that I wanted to not be horrible and that I wanted to make enough money to survive and live my life. I found the individual that still mentors me on occasion, who was quite prolific in the recruitment space with advice articles, campaigning for things to be done much better in the recruitment world and the recruitment industry, and was really kind of championing an empathetic and ethical mindset. So I went on LinkedIn. I sent this individual a message, which was basically, "Hello, name. I've been following your content on how not to be a bad recruiter for the last whatever. I'm in my first ever role. These are the things going well. These are the things I'm finding difficult. Could I please have 10 minutes of your time to ask you the below 3 questions? Here's my number and email. If you don't have time to reply, no worries at all. I appreciate you reading this," kind of thing. And I left it at that. And I got an email back, which was a very classic C-suite-esque reply, which was, "Hey, Tim, like your style. Here's my number. Call me on this day and time." And that was been the start of a 12, 13-year relationship where on and off I've had support and advice when I've needed it. I've not used them as a crutch. I've always done everything in my power to solve my own issues or find my own answers before, in my mind, I go and book them. And it's been a really wonderful kind of relationship and now very close friendship. I mainly message them now to do big breakfasts whenever I'm in the area in which they live. So I think what worked for me was just being very forthright with what I wanted. I didn't outright ask them to be my mentor in the first message. That's a kind of, to me, like proposing on the first date. I was just establishing that connection, being upfront with what I was asking, but I also wasn't kind of taking the proverbial either, taking the time to talk to me on a phone call for 15 minutes with questions I've already given you, as opposed to me going, "Hey, can I have an hour of your time?" It allowed them to be very accurate and tactical with their own time and what they're actually going to be getting potentially involved with. And then I was able to kind of cultivate that relationship with them. Of course, that approach worked well because this person, like me, is an agency recruiter, and we are people that typically are wired towards being highly extroverted and liking that very direct approach. That might not be directly applicable to the indie scene, but I would say do your research, know the type of individual that you would like to potentially have as a mentor, and try and cultivate a relationship with them. It's, at the end of the day, it's just best practices in networking. And, if someone has the capacity to be a mentor, they might be signed up with one of the many video game mentoring schemes out there. I'm not going to name any specifically, so I'm not advertising unduly or anything, but there are lots of lovely ones out there. Or they might just offer it ad hoc and be like, "Hey, why don't we check in next week and just have a chat?" You might never discuss the M word. You might never make it mentoring official, but you will have like a valued colleague or someone to have discourse with who you do learn a lot from. And, who knows what that could lead to. But just just be yourself, be direct and honest. And if people don't vibe with that, they're probably not going to be a very good mentor for you anyway, for whatever reason.
Cool. I like that a lot. I guess I'm in my mind, I was automatically making it more formal than I meant to, just because, going to college, I had, counselors, advisors, like people who that's what they did,
Sure.
So I need to back off a step and, who knows, deepen some other relationships if I just do, hey, yeah, here are a couple questions. And, if it evolves into more than that, great.
Yeah, exactly. I've had one or two people message me where they've been like, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" And I'm like, "Oh, that." Like my initial reaction is like, "I'm probably too busy," because it feels quite involved and stuff. But if it's someone who just wants to have a chat every couple of weeks, like there's a few people I do that with, and I guess in some ways I'm mentoring them, in some ways they're mentoring me. It's an Ouroboros at the end of the day, but I think just you don't have to make it that formal. I mean, you can totally just be like, hey, I'm looking to grow in these ways, and you're an individual who is, got stuff I feel like I could learn from. You open to a coffee or talking shop while we play a game together or something. People will be open to that if they have that capacity to be.
Awesome. That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I think the only thing I would echo here is your point about it being built gradually. It's very possible, especially if you use some sort of third-party platform. For instance, I will name somebody here. Amir Satvat has mentors in his job resources that you can look up. It's very possible that you find something along those lines, or you pay. There are paid mentor services, although I'm not a big fan of that. Where you can find a mentor instantly. But I have found that the best mentors in my life and in the lives of most of my students are people that they built relationships with gradually. So it's not, I ran into somebody and said, hey, you seem cool, can you mentor me? Usually the first conversation is just like, you ran into them somewhere, and that can be online as well, just DMing them or something. And just ask for a chat. You started with a conversation, and it isn't a mentor, it isn't formal. You just have that first conversation. And usually in that first conversation, it still isn't really a mentorship call. It's more just kind of shooting the shit, getting to know each other, building that relationship, classic networking. And then a couple weeks after that, you reach out and you go, hey, I had a great chat. You want to chat again? You have a second conversation, and maybe this time you do say, I've been trying to figure out how to, make my portfolio stronger. What did you do in your own career? And after 5, 6, 10 of those a little bit more casual conversations, it might turn into something more formal, and you might realize you have a mentor without ever having, as Tim said, used the M word. I have a business mentor in particular, as well as a game design mentor that I have had conversations with for a long time, and both of them happened very informally. They weren't anything in particular.
I mean, that's
all right.
how I initially met you, Willem, was I sent you a pun and we just got chatting, and I've learned so much about particularly the indie game scene through you and through this community, and by extrapolation all the rest I got involved with as a result of the energy here. And that came because I was just being a silly goose on LinkedIn. It can come from the most unlikely of places.
Wow, Indie Revolution. All right, so it's time, I think, for us to wrap up this episode, Tim. Our script is going to be a little useless because it assumes that we have a guest here together. But before we go, we have 2 different things we like to do here, Tim. We're live.
So first, do we have some extra credit for our listeners that they can do in the next week or apply what they've learned here today? So
maybe it's something about identifying who you need on your team.
Yeah, make a mentor shopping list and then just go after them in a friendly, like, connect on LinkedIn way, not a put a map on way or anything
Get
like
over
that.
here.
Not like in a Mortal Kombat way. But just identify who could potentially be useful or what you need in yourself to get to where you need to be, and see if there's anyone out there who might be willing to have a very brief conversation about it. And if you want to steal my approach of just sending them a forthright message with, can I have 10, 15 minutes of your time to ask these questions? it's worked quite well for me. It may work well for you, or come up with your own approach and see if you can get that first message sent out in the next week or so.
I love that. Yeah. So I'm going to take your line to repeat that. That means your extra credit assignment is to identify somebody that you could use either in your life. So if it's personal, or in your studio, if you're working with somebody or on a practice project, somebody you need for that project or for yourself. And write it out a little bit of who that person might be. We love to see our extra credit assignments get posted to LinkedIn, so you can tag us, the Indie Game Academy, and myself, Willem Delventhal, and Tim Wood, and we will say hi and be like, "Hey, you rule." Write down who you're looking for, what you're looking for. I'm looking for a mentor in this space, yada yada yada. That way, you never know. You might actually find that person, or perhaps Tim and I can even offer a suggestion on who you should reach out to. All right. Before we go, do we have anything we'd like to promote or any last words of wisdom? Tim Wood?
In terms of promotion, there will be links in the official broadcast. Click those and have a look if you wish. Otherwise, go forth with happy energy and try and connect with some mentors and get some good objectives done for yourself. I think that's the best thing I can say right now.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. The game industry is tough right now. The actual hiring space getting employed in games has been hurt pretty badly. We also have seen a tremendous rise in indie game development and indie studio founding. The problem, of course, is that many of them don't actually have money. So the money on the table is, I think, lower right this second. It will recover at some point, question mark, when? We've been saying that for a long time. But it is a tremendous time period for indie founders. And of that giant conglomerate of indie founders, your individual likelihood of any kind of breakout massive success may be low. But the likelihood of an indie dropping the next Balatro is extremely high because there are so many of us. One of you will drop the next Balatro. So go for it. There's nothing stopping you. The most likely way that you make it happen right now is that it is a thing that you're doing on the side. So perhaps accept that for a little while, but always strive for more and always strive to find that money. Okay. I think that might be it for now, except that Tim, did you see in the comments that Jekko has already done your homework?
Oh, nice one, Jekko. Yes. Let me put my LinkedIn in the chat if that's okay.
Yes.
And send me a message there because then I will definitely see it and then I can get right to it. Nice
Amazing.
one.
So for those who can't see the chat and are just listening, Jekko instantly said, "Hey Tim, can I have 10 or 15 minutes of your time?"
Game over.
All right, everybody. I think that is officially it. We will see everyone again next week. Remember that we're here every single Wednesday from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us live in the podcast in the Discord, links to join down below, to ask your own questions live. And you can hit us up for some of those links in the description as well. All right, Tim. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching.
Absolutely. Goodbye.
Game over.